Jamie Barnett, thank you so much for being on my show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. First I have to thank Vic Ferrari over at the NYPD through the Looking Glass podcast for the introduction. He's the one who made this possible. He's got a great podcast. I've been friends with Vic for a couple of years now, and yeah, he's just an all-around good guy.
Yes, I would agree.
Yes. So let's start out with tell me about the organization International Cruise Victims and your role and how you became involved in this.
Awesome. Okay. First of all, I am president of the International Cruise Victims, which is a 501(c)(3) little grassroots victim advocacy organization started in 2006. Well, I say started, it was incorporated in 2006. It began with four families. I was not one of them who lost loved ones at sea, and all of them under mysterious circumstances. And somehow those folks, those four families, managed to find each other, and they went to Congress and started, alerting Congress to the fact that something really needed to be done about these incidences happening on cruise lines and nothing being done about them. And so they ended up going to several hearings in Congress, thank goodness. And Congress ordered or mandated, rather, the cruise industry to meet with victims. By then, I was involved and see what the cruise lines would voluntarily agree to do to keep passengers safer and more secure. And the outcome of that was absolutely nothing.
Well,
There
the
was
cruise, yeah, because the cruise line, if they're gonna, volunteer to do something like that, first they would have to admit there's a problem. So,
you
and they're not
sure?
going to do that.
That's the same reason they don't warn people to never let your guard down, always be aware of your surroundings, because then they would have to admit there's a problem.
Right.
Don't ever like to do that. Um, so we went back to Congress and we said, you know what? They won't do anything. So Congress said, okay, then it's going to take legislation. And so we started with our little bitty stories and going up against that big giant Goliath industry with all kinds of money. And, the people won the day.
Okay.
In 2010, there was a law passed called the CVSSA, which stands for Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act. It was signed into law by President Obama, and it was the first law ever that really had to do with passenger care and concern and safety. So we were proud of it, and we soon learned, but you can't stop and rest once that is achieved. And it took a long time, 5 years, to get that to happen. But
Wow.
um, we then began to realize what regulations and the implementation of those regulations takes. And, there are still plenty of things in the CVSSA that have not been implemented because of rulemaking processes and stuff like that. But that doesn't stop us. We're not going anywhere. We're still hard at it, and we've had other legislation passed, and we're happy to say new legislation was just introduced in August
Okay.
to build on the CVSSA, and it's known as the CPPA, Cruise Passenger Protection Act. So I hope people will contact their representatives and say, hey, I want to see something done about safety on cruise ships. Please support these bills. So that's
Abs
kind of that part of the story.
Yeah, but it's great that you're making headway that way, and that's how you have to do it is through, legislation. But if people don't vigorously enforce those laws, then it's kind of moot point. That's stage one, I guess, is the best way to put it.
This is true. We have meetings with the FBI, we have meetings with the US Coast Guard, we have meetings with the folks over in Europe who are manufacturing the man overboard detection technology. They're coming at this whole thing from a different angle. They want their technology installed on cruise ships. We want it too, but for different reasons.
Right. They want to make money,
Right,
obviously, and you want to save lives. That's,
right.
and before I forget, one thing that just pops out at me, you would think there'd be some kind of invention where while you're at sea, you could cast like nets, across the boat. So in case somebody did accidentally, fall, they'd fall into a net and it would be retractable when you get into port or when you need to have it retractable.
You're not the first person I've heard suggest something like that. I've also had someone suggest to me, why isn't a drone launched the minute someone
Yeah.
goes overboard to detect exactly where they are and hover over them, maybe even dropping a life preserver.
That's, yeah, drone technology has, increased exponentially.
Yeah,
From the law enforcement point of view, you can get heat signatures using a drone.
yes,
So if somebody did fall overboard, if you didn't see them, say, obviously at sea, sometimes visibility is not so great.
right.
And, they're using infrared, they're using whatever technology. I'm not a big tech guy, but there is the technology out there that can read a heat signature from a body.
Right, right. The person that talked to me about this did know exactly what he was talking about, and I thought, brilliant. You
Yes.
know, why not? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
You know,
I think at the core, then the cruise industry would have to admit that, yeah, there is a problem. And, instead of admitting it and say, hey, you know what, we're doing X, Y, and Z to, to fight it because the safety of our passengers is job one at, blankety blank cruise line. But that's no, it's like their job one is making money.
um, and 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 every time a camera gets in front of them or a reporter, they'll say exactly what you just said, and that's so disingenuous.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely nauseatingly.
Yeah, that's very, very sad. But, first off, I did want to say I'm so sorry for what happened to your daughter, Ashley. This was back in 2005.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about what happened to her on the cruise in 2005? It was aboard a Carnival cruise to Mexico.
Right. Just a 3-day little cruise. Her boyfriend planned and invited her to go on. And at first, it was strictly because it was going to be for her birthday. And she was excited about it. But then suddenly, he started inviting a whole lot of other people, all of whom were partiers. He was a drug addict. And it was one of those stories of the beautiful young lady who falls in love with the bad boy and
Mm.
thinks, if I love him enough, I can change him. And, supposedly he was trying to get clean and sober, and the cruise was she was told, was to help him do that.
Yeah, but I got to stop you right there. You don't go on a 3-day booze cruise if you're an addict. That makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever because I've watched a bunch of interviews regarding this and some TV shows, and the first thing that pops into my head, it's like if I'm an addict, I'm trying to recover. That's like a diabetic. It's like, you know what? I think I'm going to open, a candy shop.
Yes,
What could go wrong?
you're absolutely right. 100%. And she began to realize that as the whole thing progressed the way it did, and it made her really upset. And um, but she went, and on the first night of the cruise, they stayed out late and they partied. Ashley was very anti-drug, anything. She was never a partaker of drugs. And don't get me wrong, she wasn't, an angel. She would certainly have cocktails, here and there.
Right.
Um, but the evening went on and she got, you know, done with the evening activity. And she said, come on, let's go back to the cabin, go to bed because I want to get up in the morning and go into port in Mexico.
Yeah.
So they went back and he kept insisting, no, let's go to the casino. And they did have a big argument.
Mm.
And finally, he left the room and she stayed and went to bed. But what he had brought onto the ship was he smuggled um, liquid methadone in a emptied out Dayquil bottle. He poured liquid methadone. So what I don't know, and one of the inherent dangers of taking a cruise is that, I perhaps will never know whether he gave it to her, slipped some of it in something she was drinking to get her to stop, you know, kvetching about going out and just join the party, or go to bed and go to sleep, but don't fuss at me anymore. Or whether she had been sick, she had had a cold, whether she thought it was really Dayquil and took some, I don't know and never will, chances are, unless he suddenly develops a conscience and admits what happened,
Now,
because I
one
don't
of
believe he knows.
one of the shows I was watching said that he also smuggled Vicodin on board, and there was
Yeah,
Vicodin missing.
yeah. No, I don't know whether she didn't have Vicodin in her system, so
Okay. Yeah, because that one show was saying that she took Vicodin and methadone. And that
she
is a
did.
deadly combination. If you take alcohol and methadone, that's a deadly combination.
Well, she did have alcohol in her system.
Yeah.
She had some cocktails that night. So
Mm.
that's why I think it would have been easy for him to slip some in whatever she was drinking. Um,
Yes.
uh, but no, she did not. There was no Vicodin in her system, and we had all kinds of tests done on her body, and she was clearly not a drug user.
So
Um,
she was so we'll back up just a little bit.
yeah,
So her boyfriend discovered her in the morning, correct? Or
yeah.
it was like around noon, something like that.
I think even after that, and
Yeah. It was a
and
long night of partying for him, and she went back to the cabin early, and she was still, he thought, was asleep.
right,
And then lo and behold, there's
not
something wrong.
yeah,
So
right.
dialed, I guess, the ship's version of 911,
No, actually, he didn't. He went out in the hall and started
screaming.
hollering and screaming, and
Oh, that's right.
a young man standing out there was a volunteer fireman slash
Mm,
paramedic in the community he lives in, and he ran in and started doing CPR on her.
right.
And he, I got to speak with him, and
You did. Okay.
uh-huh, and he swore up and down she was viable when he got to her.
Did she have a pulse?
You
Probably
know what?
not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, if he was doing CPR and he was a trained professional, you don't do CPR on people who, you know,
Don't have a
right.
pulse, right? So finally the medics arrived, but no defibrillator, no um uh
Epinephrine, like adrenaline.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. None of that, none of the things that I don't even think they put her on the floor to do
The compressions. Yeah,
right,
because on a bed, it's very ineffective because the
right,
bed is taking
right,
most of the pressure from the compressions.
right. It was just not handled properly at all.
Wow.
And um, but the little fireman man had to tell Ashley's boyfriend, call 911. Um,
Okay.
and that's when they came. But they did not, like I said, arrive with any of that life-saving type of equipment you would expect or that you would find on land.
Right.
Uh, So ultimately, she was pronounced dead, could not be saved. Um,
Did
and
it? I've never been on a cruise, but I assume there are doctors, like doctors on board. How soon did a doctor see her compared to like medics? Do you know?
a nurse showed up first. I think it was 20 to 30 minutes before a doctor got there
Mm,
with the
okay.
defibrillator.
Oh, okay. He brought the defibrillator. Okay.
Right. And it was too late.
Mm,
Um, so um, I got the phone call from the cruise line hours after that happened.
mm.
Um, and I was told that there was a chance that her body would be left on the ship because there is a morgue there on ships. They have a little bit of that.
Right.
And but it could be taken off in Mexico. And I begged and begged and begged, don't take her off. Leave
Yeah,
her
I was
on.
that my next question was going to be how much input did you have, being her mom, is saying, "Hey, you know what? You know, keep her on there." It wasn't like a month-long cruise. It was a 3-day cruise. They have a morgue, like you said. Why? I mean, they were in Mexican waters, right? They were in their jurisdiction more or
Port.
less. Oh, they were at port. Okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So they're at port. Why would they, you're so close to the United States. And how this was the first day of the cruise?
Well, now it was the next day,
The
second
next
day.
day. Okay, so you're going back to the United States the next day. You
6
can't wait a
hours
day?
they would have been back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Mexican police came on board and did an investigation, correct?
Yes, they did. They did. And they have the right to
Hmm.
because that's how the laws at sea work. And that's part of the problem. The FBI hadn't gotten there. They are the ones in charge when an American is involved of an investigation. But also, the flag state has the right to investigate, and the flag state for that ship was Panama. That's where the ship was registered.
Okay.
Um, and every port you enter after a suspicious death or a murder has the right to investigate. So it's hugely complicated. You can imagine if several investigative units have been able to trounce through a crime scene, there's not a lot going to be left to substantiate um, uh, a court verdict or
Yeah.
anything. So, but what I didn't realize until much later was she'd already been taken off the ship.
Wow. Now you have Mexican police that came on. Every ship has their own version of security.
Yeah,
Was there any kind of investigation from them? And also with the medical stuff, how good was the documentation and how easy was it for you to get any of this kind of documentation?
not easy at all.
I would
And
think.
um, I think that is something that really upsets me when people who have no idea about the circumstances on a cruise ship say things like, when one of the victims ends up having to file a claim against the cruise line, the reason they do, I mean, trust me, we know it's not going to bring our loved one back.
Right.
Um, but that's the only way you get information. That's the only way you get um, interrogatories. It's the only way you get discovery is in the process of filing this claim in civil court. So, um, it has nothing at all to do with being litigious or sue happy. It's
Yeah,
the only
but that's the
get
only way, like you said, what you're doing by, going through the court system, et cetera, is trying to prevent another death. That's all,
absolutely
that's what that is.
that's what we're still doing. 15 years later,
Right.
that's exactly what we're still doing. Um, but so that's how that happened. And there are other laws that are limiting and came into play in Ashley's case. One of them is called DOSHA, which is Death on the High Seas Act. And it's another way the cruise lines operate with such impunity. If you die, if you die, they are pretty much able to get off scot-free because of a 1920 law
Oh
known
God.
as Death on the High Seas Act that was passed back in 1920 to give widows of seafarers who died at sea some semblance of the kind of income they would have received over the course of their loved one's lifetime working. So now, cut to modern day, when cruise lines as they are now are nothing like circumstances were in 1920. Um, if someone dies on a cruise that didn't support their loved ones, like a child,
Hmm.
Ashley didn't support me, or a retired person
Sure.
who's no longer earning, their loved ones are entitled to nothing. Their life was worthless in
Oh,
terms of finance. So that's something that my organization fights tooth and nail.
yeah,
And the cruise line comes out with money galore to keep that from happening.
I'm sure. So, all this happens. They take Ashley to a morgue in Mexico and they do an autopsy on her there, correct?
They did.
Did they do the toxicology as well?
They did. Mhm.
And from my understanding, there was methadone in her body. Did they issue a death certificate, like with cause and manner of death?
The cause of her death was uh uh um
Overdose
Oh,
or
I don't think they used the word, maybe they did use the word overdose, but methadone toxicity.
okay, that sounds right. Yeah.
Right. And but manner unknown. So
Okay.
and
So did they embalm her afterwards?
had to be embalmed. That's another issue to come back across the border
Uh,
um through Mexico. She had to be embalmed.
which
And
makes which makes an autopsy in America a lot more difficult as far as toxicology goes.
well, and another complication is the coroner in Los Angeles wouldn't have anything to do with her because she'd already been autopsied. So
Really? Wow.
we had to, thank goodness, I had someone who knew how to do this. And I had, friends who opened up their pocketbooks because it wasn't cheap to
Sure.
find and hire a private forensic pathologist.
Oh, gosh.
And all he had to work with was the fluid in her eyes.
Yeah, the vitriol fluid. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Wow. And that showed the same thing?
It did. Yeah.
Okay. Was there any trauma to her body? Like, was any signs of a struggle or defensive wounds, anything like that?
No, there wasn't. No, there
Okay.
wasn't.
The cop in me is, kicking into overdrive with this. Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's when it comes to homicide, many, many times, okay, what's the motive? Why would somebody want to do this to her? Is there anybody that you would see as benefiting or any kind of reason why somebody would want to do that to your daughter?
Um, well, none other than what I was saying a while ago. I think that my best guess is that she was given the methadone by her boyfriend just to get her, he thought it would just make her go to sleep.
Mm, okay.
I truly don't. Maybe I'm naive. I mean, but like you, I don't see where he would have had a motive to really kill her.
Right. There's like no insurance thing. There's no, like
No,
accusations of infidelity, because what you do is you look at money, you look at jealousy, you look at rage, you look at, those are every homicide I've ever, investigated or been a part of. Those are the things or heat of the moment, those types of things, or something planned, something nefarious that's, somebody's plotting, but usually it does circle back to money, greed, those kinds of things as well. So I don't know, I'm thinking what you're thinking. I think this was probably accidental, but there is a huge amount of culpability for the boyfriend for doing this because it never would have happened if he wouldn't have, brought this stuff on board with them. And methadone isn't like a party drug. It's like when you think of a cruise, it's a booze cruise, in 3 days going down to Mexico, let's go have some fun. What I think of is, like marijuana, that would be hard to get on board, and it's very noticeable, obviously.
Oh, it
And
was everywhere on that ship,
it,
Patrick. Everywhere. We have videos of people just right out in the open,
see, that's what
smoking.
I think of when I'm thinking of like party drug. Obviously, booze, you're encouraged to get drunk on a cruise,
Yeah.
with the different packages and, like drink packages. And well, I have to drink my money's worth, that's kind of like the thought process. And
Right.
then, like marijuana, okay, that's going to be on board, and sometimes ecstasy or cocaine. But
Mhm.
I've never investigated, and I've investigated a lot of things like this where methadone was the drug of choice.
Well, he was a recovering heroin addict, and that
Yeah.
never comes out. He never reveals that in the interviews that, he gave back then.
Yeah,
Or
they use heroin addicts and people who are addicted to opiates, methadone, because it lasts a lot longer than heroin or, like say Vicodin or, whatever the case may be. And it's more or less used to try to wean them off, the nasty side effects from withdrawals. And in every big city USA, there's methadone clinics.
yes, right,
And I've responded to methadone clinics, I don't know how many times for
right,
trouble with this or trouble with that, or they're smoking pot out in front of the methadone clinic, or they're doing,
right,
I mean, just all kinds of crazy, crazy stuff.
right.
So, boy, so you know, you get an independent pathologist to look at your daughter. Was there an official like death certificate given here in America
Her death certificate is no, it's from Mexico.
from Mexico? So that doesn't change.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, the boyfriend, was he questioned? You know what? Let's just jump into the investigative side of this. This is what I'm always interested in. Who called the FBI?
The ship,
The ship did because they had to, or I'm assuming.
they had to
Okay, so the FBI, how long did it take the FBI to respond to that ship?
till it got back to port.
Oh,
Um,
so they waited until it got back to port in America?
that's how they do. Yeah, yeah.
I
In
mean,
any crime.
not to be all Mr. Conspiracy guy, but if I wanted to cover something up, you could scrub that room clean. And if there's any kind of indicators, if there's any kind of evidence, that's more than enough time to get rid of it.
And it happens all the time. All
Ugh.
the time. Yeah.
It just, man. So 6 hours later, they're in port in America, and
36.
I'm sorry, what?
36.
36 hours later.
Yeah, right.
Now, did they bring Ashley back on board?
No.
So who transported Ashley back to America?
Um uh that you know what? I'm not sure I know.
Okay. And I'm just wondering if the
All
cruise
the
ship,
other
did the cruise ship facilitate that, the company? Or did you have to?
um somebody did. It was not me.
Okay.
Uh
So they
I
did
was
probably.
I was
Okay.
not in, uh um I don't know where there was I know before she got back, we went to the funeral home
Okay.
in here and they got in touch with. the
Okay.
folks there. So in
Sure.
a certain sense, it could have literally been the funeral home that facilitated.
Yeah, there's companies that will they could subcontract to
Yes.
take care of that. So
Yeah.
the FBI is called. How long did it take for you to talk to an FBI agent regarding this? And how many FBI agents were called to this? Do you know?
I don't know how many. I know I was taken into a little room there at the port. I can remember, sorry, hold on. I can remember it was raining
Yeah,
and standing in the rain. And in my mind, the captain of the ship was going to come talk to me, right?
right.
And um, and I saw him coming up the sidewalk, and somebody was in uniform also was walking, a woman walking beside him, and he went right by me and never acknowledged me, never said a word to me. And the guard that was standing, port security person standing next to me said, "Oh, yeah, they said he has high blood pressure and they're taking him in to go to see the doctor."
The FBI agent had high blood
Oh,
pressure?
the captain of the ship.
Oh, okay,
That's
okay.
why he didn't
So
talk
he
to me.
didn't have to be there for it.
No.
Yeah, that
And so then they took me inside to meet with several FBI agents and asked me all kinds of questions. And they wouldn't let anyone be in there with me. Um, and that was pretty traumatic, to have to go through that.
sorry
Um,
about that. That's Clark. He wanted to come up and say hi.
Good. He looks a lot like Nora, who I'm sure would like to get up in my lap too.
But so you have this meeting, and if I remember correctly, they had you out in the rain for like 4 hours.
It
They
was
didn't
good.
treat you for the circumstances. They did not roll out the red carpet. They did not treat you humanely, really, from
Oh, you're absolutely right.
yeah, from what I gather. And then what was your first impression from the FBI agent that you spoke with?
Um, it seemed to be, you have to remember that there at that time, I knew very little about why she died,
Yeah,
hardly anything. Um, uh, and I can remember the nurse that called me on the phone saying, we looked at her body and we could tell there was no indications of, drug usage like with a needle. And I'm like, my God, what are you talking about?
right.
I didn't know if she died, um, she fell down a flight of stairs, or,
Yeah,
I didn't know anything. And so I found their questioning strange.
yeah.
And uh, I believe, yeah, I had talked to her boyfriend the day before, um, and, began to piece things together a little bit. And he was just, I'm sure he was messed up when he finally talked to me. Because I kept thinking, he knows what happened. He knows what happened. He
Yeah.
can and but he was so messed up and wasn't even making sense when we talked. And
So what did the FBI like? What did they say? It's like, okay, your daughter is deceased. This is our preliminary investigation. This is what happens next. I mean,
yeah,
what?
they were like, they wanted to know a little bit about her
Sure.
personality, her traits, and her relationship with her boyfriend. And um uh Patrick, I was just in
You were in
such
shock.
shock. I was,
Absolutely. I would, any parent would be.
yeah.
And are you going through this alone, or were you married at the time?
Nope.
Oh,
Nope.
I'm so sorry. You had to do this by yourself.
Yeah, I had friends with me,
Yeah.
but they were not it was basically just me. My husband, ex-husband was at remarried and living in Texas at the time. And so it was just me.
God, I'm so sorry. So, what was the timeline, or what did the FBI investigation look like? Did they have a CSI person come into the cabin to process, because that's a crime scene. The first thing you do is, what they should have done is tape it off, kick the boyfriend out of there, and leave everything exactly the way it was.
You're absolutely right. And to tell you the truth, of course, they probably got on the ship. I mean, I know they got on the ship after it came back. But then again, that was 36 hours later. I know no one, no, not from the boyfriend to the other people that were with him or a representative of Carnival Cruise Line stayed with her, got off with her body. Nobody.
Hmm.
So, and I was on vacation and I was in Florida.
Okay.
And so I had to call my oldest son, her older brother,
Yeah.
and say, "Can you go, please go.
Right.
Don't leave her alone." And
Absolutely.
and he did, bless his heart. He and his wife
Yeah.
and his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, all four went down.
So, do you know if the crime scene was processed by the FBI?
It was,
Okay.
and I can tell you this, that most of the information I got from them was this comment. I can't comment on that because I don't want to jeopardize the integrity of the investigation.
Okay. So let's fast forward then. How long did it take them to investigate this? And what were their conclusions? What were their findings?
Here's the I wish I could give you a time length of
I guess
time,
I
but
guess I'm asking the time thing because, was it a 3 month investigation, a week? Do you think
no,
they kind of hurried it along and boom, they just did it and that was it?
it went on
Okay.
several months, but I never got a lot of information out of them. And in the end, they said we really didn't have jurisdiction. And I went,
Hmm.
what? You know,
Yeah.
as the Mexican authorities claimed they had jurisdiction. And truthfully, I mean, this is sad to say, but a wonderful friend of mine and his father-in-law took me to Mexico 3 times to meet with the investigative
Yeah.
authorities there.
Hmm.
I got so much more information out of them. They were so much more sympathetic and compassionate and cooperative than the FBI ever thought about being.
Now, what was the final conclusion of the Mexican police that investigated this?
Um, uh, the conclusion that they came to was just the same. It was methadone overdose. Don't know, or
Unknown how it happened.
yeah, right.
And
Don't
is
know.
that pretty much what the FBI came up with as well?
But I can say this. Two things I don't want to forget, something about
Yeah.
the FBI and their investigation. The last thing I know is that Ashley's case was ruled homicide
Okay.
by the U.S. attorney, and he met with me and my attorney, who was Gloria Allred,
Hmm.
um, uh, and said, "So there's no statute of limitations on that."
Correct. Yes.
And I was relieved and greatly relieved. Um, so that's how it ended in the US. But the thing that really got me, and I'm sure with your investigative background, you'll understand, um, my folks, team of people that were, walking me through this tragedy were saying, there's no blood, in her to test in the
Yeah.
US. You need to get her blood samples back from Mexico.
Oh, okay.
With, you know,
Yeah.
make the FBI go down there and get that and bring it back.
Which makes sense. Yes.
Yes. So I did. And the way they did this, and maybe you can shed some light on why they did it this way. Um, uh, they called me and they said, we're coming back with the blood samples. We want to meet you in, it was a shopping center parking lot.
Okay. That's odd.
It, don't you think?
Yes.
And by then they knew we had hired this forensic pathologist.
Yeah.
And to this day, I don't know why they wouldn't have taken it directly to him, and or even to my house. But they said, let's meet in this parking lot, go around to the back behind this one store.
Oh my gosh.
And so a friend of mine went with me.
Yeah.
We got out and they were going to just hand it to me. And I went, no, don't just hand this to me, tape it up. I want them. And they're going, why? And I said, because I want there to be a, proof that the chain of custody
Yeah.
was.
That my next thing is I was going to say is the chain of custody is on Jump Street is going to be very, very difficult. You're going through a different country. How many different hands have handled this? Blood is perishable. It has to be refrigerated or at least kept
It
cool.
was in a cooler. It
Yeah,
was a cooler.
but it may not have been for point A, you
Yes.
know, to point Z, getting to you. So as far as from a law enforcement point of view, if, I'll say, for example, drunk driver, if we do a blood draw, there's a
Yeah.
chain of evidence that has to be, adhered to. And there's
Right.
cameras, there's witnesses, there's, I know when my officer takes blood from, say, person X at the hospital, the nurse does the blood draw or the doctor, there's very specific protocols.
Right. Well,
So a
yeah.
defense attorney doesn't say, hey, you did this, or "Hey, how do I know?" So I could see some of that, but I could totally see why you would want it brought back here and be tested here. So at the very end, what it was ruled a homicide. The FBI did their thing. I mean, what did they leave you with? Or did they leave you with anything but just more questions?
Absolutely. Just more questions.
Hmm.
Um, was shocked then that what did you put me through all this for if you in the end said, yeah, we really didn't have jurisdiction. And yet, you know, um, I go through to the U.S. attorney who tells me, we've ruled it a homicide, and um, want you to know there's no statute of limitations.
But
And
it's a homicide, and there's a misnomer out there that people think, well, now it's a cold case.
yeah,
And it's never, or it's closed. It's never closed until we find out who did the homicide, who the suspect. If you develop a suspect, either you arrest them or the person dies, of old age or whatever. I mean, that happens in these situations, but it never goes away. I mean, there's plenty of them out there. So who is the government agency that's responsible for her case?
the U.S. attorney, I guess,
Okay.
uh,
Do they ever contact you or give you information saying, do you ever like contact them and say, what's going on with my case?
No, I have not. Um,
It's just a suggestion. Sometimes it's good to put a face to, one of how many different files that are, stowed away
right.
somewhere. You know, be a pest, bug them.
I can do that.
But, and from my experience, it does not bring closure, but at least there'll be justice served. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And what people need to remember is when you leave this country, you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit with your safety and, medical stuff. Way back when my ex-wife, one of her best friend's friend, went on their honeymoon to Mexico.
Uh-huh.
He got into a drowning situation. He was out in the ocean. They fished him out, and it took forever to get anybody to help. And then it took like a half hour, 45 minutes for an ambulance to get there. And then the hospital was like a half an hour away. And by the time all of that transpired, he was gone.
Oh gosh.
And, the body wound up back in America, and the doctors in America or whoever that was the investigators were like, if this is America, he would still be with us.
Oh yeah.
And on a cruise ship, it's there's
Even worse.
no it's yeah, it's absolutely worse. And you're kind of on your own safety wise. Oh, look at that cute dog. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But yeah, you're on your own. And people need to be cognizant of that. We just think that, every place is like where we are right now.
We do.
We
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah, I truly believe that very few Americans, and I can only speak, for Americans, know that when they step aboard a cruise ship, that they bought a ticket from in America, from a company based in America, in a port in America. They have no idea all of the rights and the laws that they've relinquished when
Yes,
they step on that ship.
absolutely. And there is a pseudo security, but their vested interest is in the
The cruise
company.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to do everything in their power to make it look like, hey, everything's great here. Nothing to see here. These aren't the droids you're looking for, that kind of thing. And it only makes sense. And of course, bad behavior is kind of encouraged. It's like we want you to drink a lot. We want you to party. And, we all know when you mix all that together, bad things can happen.
Oh, well, absolutely. Absolutely. And yet, you would think that would make them be inclined to be more responsible with their serving of alcohol. And instead, they some years ago came up with this all you can drink for one price.
Right.
Um,
And
you
people are
know,
gonna, you know what? I'm a bartender. I bartend a couple nights a week. And if you say open bar, people act a lot differently than they do if they're, it's a psychological thing. They want to drink their money's worth. And if it's
oh,
free, it's like, whoa, hello, here
yeah.
we go. It's like, so that's, yeah, yeah, all bets are off when it comes to that. Now, I did watch the Netflix special, Amy Bradley is missing. And
Yeah.
your connection to this case, what do you think happened to Amy? What do you think?
I do not think she went overboard. I can say that. Um, I I I think somehow she was smuggled off that ship. I hope and I pray right along with Iva and Ron and Brad that she's still alive. But I think she was alive when she was taken off that ship. So, uh, absolutely. We look at case after case after case of people who've gone missing off cruise ships. And um, God only knows.
Right.
There's no
I
proof
think
that
I
she went
think
overboard.
she's being trafficked.
I do
That's
too.
that's what's in my heart of hearts. That's what I think. She's got a pretty miserable existence right now, and I hope that somehow she gets out of that and she's reunited with her family. That's
I
That's my
do.
hope.
I do too. I talked to Iva, uh, her mom,
Yeah.
often,
Yes.
and have known her for a long time. But I can see, and the more I look into different cases and situations, what a perfect connection cruise ships could be for trafficking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what do you think could be done to make cruise ships safer? Just some low-hanging fruit. What do you think?
I was going to say, have you got about 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, just like the main points, that if
Yes.
if somebody you're let me rephrase that. Why would you tell somebody who's thinking about or their adult child is thinking about taking a cruise and they're
Uh,
hell bent on going?
right. I have lots of things that if you go to our website, internationalcruisevictims.org, we have a brochure in there that gives you lots of things
Okay.
you could do. Like make sure you're always with a buddy, use the buddy system. Always be aware of your surroundings. Never, never, never let your children out of your sight.
Well,
Never.
there's a lot of those, cruises that, it's like, hey, we got kid camp, we'll take your kid for the day while you can go out and frolic and have fun and whatever else. I'm leaving my children with somebody I have no idea who they are, if they've been vetted whatsoever.
You wouldn't do that on land,
No. Mm-mm.
right? Right. That's such a good point, Patrick. And and here's a statistic that makes me angry and sad and horrified all at the same time. The number one crime committed on a cruise ship is sexual assault.
Yes.
And 33% of those sexual assaults are committed against minors.
Oh,
And that's another thing that the cruise industry will fight tooth and nail to keep from the public.
yeah. Wow.
We know it because of congressional testimony. And I
Yeah.
think the public should know it.
Yeah.
And so we really want to warn people about that. And where and when it happens most often is going to or going from the kid camps.
Yeah. And then, like for adult kids, partying, obviously, if you're female, keep an eye on that drink. Don't
You
let it
bet.
out of your sight. That,
You bet.
I have an example. My neighbor, um, sh she's a mom. She's got two adult age girls. One is I think 29, the other one's 26. And the 26-year-old went on a all-inclusive in Mexico with her boyfriend. And the first night she got roofied. The bartender
Oh my
roofied her.
God.
So,
See, yeah, you got to
and
watch even from the person who's
yeah,
making that
yep,
drink
yeah,
all the way through.
absolutely. You want to watch them making your drink. So
Yep.
for me, it's like, yeah, I'll take that bottle of X, Y, or Z.
Yes.
Your paws aren't in there. All you're doing is taking the cap off. Not that something bad could happen, but the chances are less, and
Less.
it's more difficult to, do whatever to it. But
Right.
she's telling me, said, yeah, I got roofied. I had one and a half drinks, and she says I could barely stand. And her boyfriend's like, "What's wrong with you?" She says, and he was a cop, and he's like, "You got roofied," and
Oh
it's
my.
the bartender because he's the only other person that had access to your drink.
And see,
So
no telling who bartender had a connection with,
yeah, exactly. So
right?
and it's like, okay. Then a couple of days later, he got roofied. It was what what happened was I think it was a drink meant for her, and he took it.
And he took
So
it.
he got roofied. She's walking him back to the room, and there's a girl on the ground getting Narcan. She was overdosing. So she said, we packed up our stuff and we left the next day. She said, we're done. We're so done with this.
Oh my gosh, I guess so.
Yeah. So yeah, buyer beware. Just, yeah. What sounds like it
Right.
might be super awesome and great, a lot of times is not.
Yes.
So, you
I
know,
agree. The
per,
older kids, they have like clubs for teenagers.
Yes.
right? But they all close at 11 o'clock, all of them. So if you have kids that age, they need to be back in their cabin by 11 o'clock because nothing good is going on after
Yeah.
11.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Oh, all right. Well, let's wrap this up. We talked about precautions. Is there anything else you could think of regarding any of this?
I would suggest to folks, especially if you're older or you have a underlying health issue, that you get a great checkup before you go on a cruise. Make sure you're in, healthy enough because if you should fall ill, have a heart attack, a stroke, you're not going to get, high tech clot busters or all the things that you would get in a
Yeah.
hospital in the US on a ship, and it's going to be a long and expensive journey off that ship to a land-based hospital. So make sure you're well enough to go.
Okay.
And otherwise, consider taking out travel insurance as well as travel assistance.
Mm.
um, we had a gentleman whose wife had a heart attack on a cruise ship recently, very recently, and they said we need to get her off the ship, but getting her off the ship was going to cost them $15,000.
Oh, oh God.
Wait, and it gets worse, which they asked for in cash.
Oh, in cash. It feels like you're getting bribed or extorted or there's like some nefarious thing going on.
Doesn't it?
It sure does.
And they
Wow.
wasted valuable time negotiating the fact that who in the world on it was a 3-day cruise
Yeah.
would have $15,000 in
Just
cash.
laying around with them. Yeah. Nobody even carries cash anymore for the most part. I
No.
mean, why would you? I just,
So,
oh,
yeah.
oh,
So
oh my God.
regardless of whether it's cash or not, try to take out both of those insurances
Okay.
if you're able to help.
Now, can you say, and I know for different reasons, can you say like which cruise lines are a bit safer or a better bet compared to others?
I can tell you which ones are the worst,
Okay, go
and
ahead.
that's Carnival and Royal Caribbean in terms of the crime rates. Now
Okay.
you can go on the Department of Transportation cruise ship crime portal and see all of those yourself.
Okay.
So I'm not saying anything that isn't public knowledge.
Right, right. Yeah, I went on the FBI's website and I saw that I think it was Disney and what was the other one? It was Disney and let's see here. Yeah, Disney was one of the best that had the lowest crime
Uh,
rate out of all the, like main ones.
right.
And
You know what's interesting? I'll just point this out, and few people know this. Florida is the only state in the country that should a crime occur on a ship coming back into port in Florida,
yeah.
the FBI can relinquish jurisdiction, investigative jurisdiction over to the authorities there, the Broward County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, okay. Like
And
if it was in
those
Miami or
folks, yeah, those folks will get to the bottom of it.
okay.
And we're trying to get that. We've tried to get that in California.
So
Uh,
maybe something to think about if you're going to be taking it, maybe go out of Florida.
yeah, yeah, because
Okay.
they'll go after them.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, tell you what, let's wrap this up. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we say goodbye?
I think that I've pretty much covered it. So
All
no,
right, Jamie.
thank you.
What would your contact information be for somebody who might have questions regarding anything that we talked about?
Probably the best way to get to me is through www.internationalcruisevictims.org.
.org. Okay.
Right. And I do respond to every single story we get sent to us about something they've been through or question. We're gonna respond to it for sure.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being here today. I truly appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Okay.
All right.